All right, welcome, welcome. It is the 20th of March, 2024. Hey, everybody. This is Gimbalabs Live Open Spaces. We get together every Wednesday and Thursday from 14:30 until 1600. Hang out for 90 minutes, and we build stuff together. What we do is at the start of each meeting, we take a look at this Miro board right here. Here it is. And if I zoom out, you can see that we've been organizing our work for a little more than 2 months now. We've been moving into this process, or just about 2 months, I guess I should say. And we have this chance to start every day by anybody who wants to grabbing a sticky note and jotting a note about what you want to do today. After we spend a few minutes doing that, we will talk through the options that are on the board, and then we'll decide what's happening in the main room and what's happening in breakout rooms. Anybody have any questions about the process? All right, let me set a timer for 2 minutes. You've got access to this Miro board, but if for any reason you can't get onto it, feel free to unmute and say what you want to work on, or just drop a note in the chat and I'll copy and paste it onto this board. In 2 minutes, we'll talk through our options and then we'll jump in. See you then. Looks like things are slowing down. Any objections to just jumping into the conversation? And I'll stop the clock here. Of course, if you have other ideas, feel free to bring them up. So I can see Coxygen. Who's that?
That's me. I was talking today to Bernard and from Wims, and well, we couldn't figure it out actually because he got this proposal funded, and the way he described to me didn't get how it's gonna work. And I asked him to come tomorrow to the open spaces so that we can hopefully kind of collaborate because it's pretty similar to what we do Gimbalabs and it's different in some way. So maybe just announcement for tomorrow. I hope Wims shows up and presents his vision because today we were talking. It's like he got funded and he got some people on board with this project, and maybe we as Gimbalabs, it could be a nice collaboration so that a funded project in our kind of scope is always a good thing to think about.
Cool. Thanks for taking the lead on that. Yeah, definitely keep us posted as to what's going on there. That's great. Working together or silently, was that Harsha?
Yeah, that was me.
Do you want to share any thoughts on that one?
So I was thinking, like, since there'll be a group that'll be working on PPBL 24, if we are not able to contribute meaningfully in that aspect, I thought we could just work. Since we are spending time here, I thought people could just work on anything that they're working on and spend the time like building stuff. Yeah.
Beautiful, and thank you. I would give anything for this to be an in-person meeting twice a week. Oh my gosh, just to be in a room with you guys and all be doing our own thing would feel real good. So we'll take what we can get. That's great. And yeah, no surprise. I said this last week. I'm really excited to work on building the course outline. So I'm just going to open 3 breakout rooms because there's no cost to doing so. So there they are. They don't have names on them and people can use those. But would it be okay if we used the main, well, let me ask you guys, should we use the main room for this education work, or should the people working on the course outline leave and go to a breakout room? Any thoughts?
So I'm personally leaning towards it being in the main room, just because, it'll be published on YouTube and people also know how the course is built and not just like directly jumping into the course.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody okay if we do this for today? Yeah, so this is my working session. I've said it before. My goal with this space is for it to just be a place where we're doing things that we might have done anyway, and just a chance to collaborate. So let me open up the course outline. This is live at this link where anybody can follow along. So I'll drop this into the chat. And let's just check. I think it's set up so that, yeah, anybody who's logged in should be able to write comments. Okay, so if you have a free Notion account of any kind, you'll be able to comment on this doc. So where did we leave off last week? Last week, we took a look at last year's course outline. And we read through it a little bit, and Hinson, for example, shared some comments. Then we talked about some things that could possibly happen, some ideas. We know we want to try to build connections with students. We have some ideas for lessons, right? Maybe there's some way to even think about a role that Gimbal tokens could play. And then a good frame, right? Anybody who's responsible for writing student learning targets should always be asking this question: how will we measure this? So I forget who said this, but I want to say thanks because this is so important. Sometimes people ask how you can tell if a learning target is a good learning target. And a big part of the answer is, well, is it measurable? Will anybody know? Right? Will the learner know that they learned that learning target? And B, will the people building the course have a way to know whether or not people are learning things? If we're able to measure that, you've got a good learning target. And a lot of us have talked about this before, but once again, it's always worth reiterating. This first module right here demonstrates this. Can you measure whether or not somebody can connect a Cardano wallet to pre-prod? Well, it's complicated, actually. The learner should be able to know. They should be able to see their address, or if they're using Eternal or Nami or any other wallet, they should be able to see the indicator that says pre-prod, and they should be able to grab that address and look it up on preprod.cardano scan, for example. But if we only think about this learning target, if we think about only this one all by itself, as a teacher, how can I know for sure whether or not somebody can connect their wallet to pre-prod? Just the connection part. The only way I can think of is I would have to maybe have them share their screen with me and show me that their wallet was connected to pre-prod. Could we do that? Yeah, we could do that. We could make a surveillance course where we have to like look at students' screens to confirm something like this. But fortunately, there's a much better answer. The answer is this. Well, as a teacher, I'm not actually going to assess this directly, right? What I'm going to do instead is have people do something with that wallet. And as a teacher now, I make an assumption. Here's the assumption I make. I say, well, if somebody can show me an address that has Tata in it on pre-prod, then I'm going to assume that they did this thing. Does that make sense? I'm not assessing this directly, but I'm saying that, yo, if you can show me your own pre-prod address with Tata in it, I'm going to assume that we're good enough on both of these. Now, even that, there's a problem with that, because somebody could just tell me an address that belongs to somebody else. And that's why we're not putting too import on these early learning targets, right? Like if we said, hey, show us that you have a pre-prod address and we'll give you 100 mainnet ADA, that would be a dumb thing to do because then people would have a reason to cheat. We're just saying, well, have we gotten this far? And can we move on to the next thing? Okay. And what's the next thing? Well, the next thing is a learning target that's absolutely not measurable by the teachers. And this is so important that part of the reason this learning target is here is it helps students understand how the course works. Because one of my goals, and I want to know whether or not people feel the same way, one of my goals is for students to know that we're not going to hold their hand and assess everything. And there's no way for me to know whether or not Hinson knows how to safely store his keys, right? He has to know that. And I'm going to trust that he does, but I'm not going to check. And by the way, if he fails, like if he gets hacked and somebody steals his keys, well, I guess I'll know that. I'll know that he failed, but I have no way of knowing for sure success, right? And so this connects to the popular Web3 concept of sovereignty, right? We throw around this idea of sovereignty. Some people like that word, some people don't like it, right? But to me, this is the best part of it, right? So if I have sovereignty or agency or independence or whatever words you want to use, part of that is knowing that you know what you know without somebody else telling you, right? I don't need anybody else to tell me whether or not I can safely store my keys. I've proven to myself that I can, and that's all that matters. And then finally, this one makes a clear on-chain reference, right? Just like this one, do I know for sure if this person owns this address with this token? No, but I can see an on-chain record that a token was minted and the holder of that token, well, we're going to say that, hey, if you have a wallet with this token in it, we're going to assume that you did this part, and therefore this is the only thing we really needed to measure. And this is a really important overview. I'm sorry if I'm repeating some of this to people who have heard it before, but to frame our work the way that all of these fit together is really important to understand. Because as we build a course, we're going to write some learning targets that can't be measured. We call these supporting learning targets. What are some things we want students to be thinking about, even though we have no intention of measuring those things? What are some things that we could measure, but we don't really want to because we're not trying to make a surveillance course? And finally, what are the learning targets that tie everything together? And we can say, you know what? With a reasonable degree of confidence, we can say that if people do this, it's good enough evidence that they can do everything in this module. So any questions or thoughts on that framing for how modules and learning targets fit together?
And in this case that you mentioned about how the people have to make sure themselves that they can store keys safely. I was doing the exercise of formulate the first SLTs of the Plurus PBL, and I tend to think that providing the first experiences is the best way to people gain agency on the course. For example, in my SLTs, I formulate, for example, things like test some dandelion features, or for example, test some match live demo, for example, these basic and first demos in dandelion, and not in dandelion, some simple queries in dandelion, and some simple demos in Edge, for example. Not as way to qualify the knowledge of the people, but as way to gain some first experiences without notes or grading. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks for thinking about that. Do you have, where are you currently storing that draft, Seb? Or you're muted.
Sorry, in the Open Spaces Miro board?
Great, cool, thank you.
I
Other,
think
nope.
No, I finished. Thanks.
Other questions? Oh yeah, you brought this whole thing in here. Oh, cool. Do you wanna, this is actually, maybe people would rather take this approach. Do you want to share screen for a minute and go through what you've put here?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you put that there. Here, let me unshare for a minute, because this could be a nice place for people to be able to draft their own ideas.
But this Miro board is just a way. We also provide a form, a Google Doc form, where you can, in some, you can take your own approach, formulating your own SLTs. In my case, I think that those first experiences are really important to gain some kind of confidence and trust as a student. So I did this first, and that's it. For example, tools like Game Changer, for example, provides a really easy and good experience, user experience, doing the first things. If we are talking, for example, to provide the people this experience of open the first wallet, for example. Game Changer is a really good framework to do that kind of task. And all of this, that's the general idea.
Very cool. Well, so one thing we could do today, kind of combining the goals that I brought to this meeting with the idea that Harsha brought, would it be useful just to spend 10 or 15 minutes for everybody just to have a chance to think for themselves? Using this format, and if anybody's interested, go for it. What if I set a timer for 10 minutes and we just have a chance to to work independently for a minute. And then we can share some thoughts after that. Crickets. Let's try it. I'll keep sharing screen. Where I'll be working independently. And I'm not into like setting the rule that we have to stay silent. So if anybody has questions or wants to chime in, go for it. Let's throw this timer on. Can you see that on my screen?
Not yet.
How about now?
Yeah.
Does it have the time in it?
No. No numbers.
No. There we go. How's that look? All right.
That's good.
Quick question. So are we like creating a clone of the table, whoever wants to write stuff and then add it, or how are we adding it?
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to keep working in Notion because my notes are already there. So I'll share screen like this. But just as an option, if anybody wants to take a chance to collect their thoughts, you can follow the pattern that Sebastian provided on Miro.
So are we trying to write the SLT as we like, picking a boss here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's right. The work of building a course outline is both writing learning targets, the SLTs, and organizing them into modules. And often
I see.
I move back and forth between the two. Usually I have a few ideas for module titles. You can see that right here. But then I have questions. I'm like, should that really be a module? And then I start writing some learning targets and I move those around until it starts to refine.
I see. For me, I may wait a bit to see what you guys got after 10 minutes.
All right. How'd that feel? How would it feel to do like a quick round of just anybody who did put some thoughts in writing? It sounds like we have three. And Sebastian already talked a little bit about these options right here. Alex, do you want to talk us through what you've added so far?
Yeah, right. I have to remember. So one kind of more or less, well, yeah. So you can see one big thing that we always discuss is the TXO model, and being able to explain it is maybe a module in itself because it needs explanation of a validator, of a redeemer, of a datum, of transaction context, of script context, and quite a few things. But it is necessary, for example, well, for building applications, right? It's well, it's difficult to make practical, and I don't like courses which make like writing stuff just explaining things. And maybe there's a better way, I don't know, but I don't like. It's a pretty kind of cornerstone of Cardano development. So this next option is pretty easy, right? So we have quite a few tools that are being developed and are deployed, and we use them, but we kind of imply that we know them, but we don't tell about them. So maybe somewhere it's a small module or a piece of a module where tools that are useful, in some way we can deliver them to the student, and they can be learning targets specifically for each of these tools. Maybe we just maybe need to add them to different modules when we use these tools, right? Well, architecture of a DApp connects to another thing is like we have several tool chains. So, and maybe it's not right to put it in a light yellow, or maybe it has to go more in the advanced section, because now it's obvious that since we're having different tool chains, we can name DApp components at a high level in sense of architecture, and then we can replace the pieces. Yeah, so we have libraries for transaction building, we have libraries for querying blockchain, and different things, and some we can use like there are available options in different tool chains, and there are not. Maybe it's a kind of a cool idea to, once the students try low code environment and have like just interacted with the smart contract and like NFTs and just a network, to like put them in front of the idea that there's multiple options and they have to, it would be nice for them to choose one or choose several, but they have to be aware that there are options they could choose from, and they have pros and cons, and yeah. But this comes to architecture of a DApp. So to be able to choose these options, you need to know what you need to know. Yeah, and this is like, yeah, the ways to produce on-chain code, I think maybe is the most practical way, because anyway, in the end, we compile to UPLC, and starting from what are the ways to produce a smart contract, and then from having a smart contract, we can use different transaction libraries, and then also like the tools which I didn't use, such as DBSync or like whatever, chain indexers and so forth. And I'm not sure they're actually available in different, yeah, and property-based testing, or just testing applications and the test-driven development, because I want to focus on Helios and JavaScript libraries, not necessarily Helios, but Helios just I have familiarity with. One thing is that people who come from JavaScript ecosystem, they like to talk about test-driven development, but when it counts, it's so difficult to do actually. And so maybe having a module where we to utilize the work that I completed previously, or like what I did previously with Adderall and potential robot. Yeah, so it's a testing suite. Maybe it would be a good idea to show step by step how you could, for example, have like available front end, and you could build some way of interacting with a smart contract with the front end, or maybe just using a game changer in source code. So but this again, is like game changer probably has this functionality because it has everything. But on the other hand, building, so yeah, it's a kind of, but the point is that tests provide good learning targets because they're very measurable, the most measurable thing there is.
Yeah.
So having several modules on how to do this, because when I came to Cardano, it wasn't, maybe it was implied, and an assumption is that a developer knows this. Again, this depends on our vision of the ecosystem in the future. I don't know what is the good way, and should we welcome people who don't know, for example, test-driven development and property testing and other kinds of techniques.
I love that. I mean, that really connects to the concept of like sovereignty over holding your own keys that I was talking about, right? If you don't know how to run tests, well, how are you going to know that what you built works?
Well, there's some things that we assume and
right.
people just assume that the people who come, they're supposed to know. So if you don't know, well, it'll be hard for you. You won't be able to do stuff.
Yep. Other feedback for Alex? What do you think?
Yeah, Alex has the eye on the developers. They like it because at the end the PPL is not for specifically for non-technical people, but for people that have some knowledge and experience in depth. So I like it.
I didn't get it. So what do you mean? We shouldn't.
Yeah, when you're mentioning about introduction to these tools, I think your approach is taking the students to some experience with developer tools. I know I understand that, but I like your approach.
Thanks.
And I'm thrilled by these ideas. Thanks for putting this together so far. I think testing, it's about time we include this. For me, like two of the biggest topics that we've never sufficiently introduced in PPBL are testing and indexing. And so I would love for they're hard, right? Because they're big topics, and we're not going to make people experts on either of them. So the difficult question as teachers is, how do we show enough to get people going? Something useful that helps them understand the topic at a high level, and so that they know where they can go next if they want to go deeper. So yeah, I would love to make sure those are included in the course, and I'll share some notes on these ideas when I share what I was just working on. Harsha, I see a sticky note. I want to know how I can be screwed. Anything else you want to share from your thinking about the course?
That was the most knowledge I had in terms of just like storing keys, because I actually used to store keys as like images. And I read a blog about how even if you delete images, like information can still be retrieved. And when you store it as images, like it goes and stores in like a centralized iCloud server, which can again be like accessed by either Apple or some hacker. So I just thought like if people know how all the different ways like the keys can be stolen, I think we'll take safety of the keys more seriously as students.
That'll be fun. Cool. And this might, and what we've done in the past is this has been more of a conversation. We've done like a live coding session where we just talk about this problem and then we publish the video. I find it's hard. It's a hard thing to cover sufficiently. And there's a lot of topics like this, right? If we decide to go deep at all into a topic, then we're committing to going that deep, right? As deep as we need to do the topic justice. So if we say, okay, well, it's not just about telling people you better know how to safely store your keys, but really helping them be able to do it, then if we're going to commit to that, yeah, that's hard, right? It takes effort to write a comprehensive lesson that makes us feel like we're delivering on that commitment. So there's always going to be a back and forth there. Cool. I was jotting some notes on the screen, and I think it would help me to try to align with some of the ideas Alex had, and then with some of the ideas Sebastian had. And so I'm sharing this screen right here, but off screen, I'm looking at what Alex added to the Miro board. Okay. Alex, I know you like reading and philosophy and education. Have you ever stumbled upon a book called A Mathematician's Lament?
I think I've heard about it. It's a yeah, it's pretty famous. I don't think if I got to read into it, but I've heard about it a little bit. Yeah.
It's a short book, and I think it's just published straight up online. Yeah, right here in its entirety. So anybody who wants to can read this. I'll drop it in the chat right now. Okay. But let me just read a synopsis. I'm not going to read every word of the first few paragraphs, but just to have this in our minds, right? A musician wakes from a terrible nightmare. In his dream, he finds himself in a society where music education has been made mandatory. We are helping our students become more competitive in an increasingly sound-filled world. Educators, school systems, and the state are put in charge of this vital project. Studies are commissioned, committees are formed, and decisions are made, all without the advice or participation of a single working musician or composer. Since musicians are known to set their ideas down in the form of sheet music, these curious black dots and lines must constitute the quote-unquote language of music. It is imperative that students become fluent in this language if they are to attain any degree of musical competence. Indeed, it would be ludicrous to expect a child to sing a song or play an instrument without having a thorough grounding in music notation and theory. Playing and listening to music, let alone composing an original piece, are considered very advanced topics and are generally put off until college, and more often until graduate school. As for the primary and secondary schools, their mission is to train students to use this language, to jiggle symbols around according to a fixed set of rules. Music class is where we take out our staff paper. Our teacher puts some notes on the board and we copy them or transpose them into a different key. We have to make sure to get the clefs and key signatures right, or our teacher is very picky about making sure we fill in our quarter notes completely. One time, we had a chromatic scale problem, and I did it right, but the teacher gave me no credit because I had put the stems pointing the wrong way. And on and on. Imagine, and you could read the rest for yourself, imagine if that's how we taught music. Before you're allowed to sing a song, you have to be able to write musical notation on paper, right? And this is a less dramatic case, but that's part of what I think about when I try to get my mind around the concept of teaching the EUTXO model, right? In the long run, do I want people to be able to talk about the EUTXO model? Yes. Do I want people to know what datum and redeemer are? Yes, I do. And so on and so on and so forth. But personally, I struggle with the idea of ever telling people what a UTXO is or what the EUTXO model is before they do something. And this might just be the way I'm built as a learner, right? I don't understand things that people just tell me. I can read a book, but I usually have to read the book twice to understand it. And most often I need a chance to apply that knowledge. And so that's why, like, if we look at the old course outline, right, this is really why we have people, for example, building a transaction with Cardano CLI. And I wonder if this can work moving forward, right? For me, I don't want to give people headaches. I think it's a really good idea to not have people set up NICs in Module 101. But I think we have good enough access to Cardano CLI, both from pointing people towards Demeter Run, or just showing them how to install Cardano node as a binary, grab the config files and try to run it locally. Either way, if you have the chance to build a transaction by hand with Cardano CLI, you actually have to look at the UTXOs. And you see that each UTXO, it has a hash and an index, and you see the value. And maybe if you're paying attention, you see the TX out datum none. And the first time you see those words, it probably doesn't even register because you've never thought about it before. And then eventually you learn what each of these parts of the EUTXO are. You start to use them. And by doing so, you end up being able to talk about the EUTXO model. And so similar to this like music nightmare that's written about in the Mathematician's Lament, I don't want to just tell people what an EUTXO is at the beginning of a course. But what does everybody else think about that? That's a provocative idea.
Yeah, well, maybe I kind of wasn't trying to put it just in a light yellow spot, you know. But it wasn't my intention to do it in the beginning, right? I mean, just it's a sort of thing that is measurable in some sense and valid to be a student learning target. And it's what we talk about a lot in being able to develop on Cardano. And yeah, so in no way I was suggesting that we should start a course on explaining UTXO model or it should be focused around it. I just say that a lot of our success, how we measure it for developers, is for many people it clicks when I am able to explain UTXO model to someone else. And I believe it should have some kind of representation in the course, not in the beginning, absolutely. It should be somewhere around DApp architecture and choosing your tool chain.
You know, it gets me thinking, and I don't know, I put a question mark here, like if whatever we start with, maybe at the end of like the onboarding modules, we have a short module that's called What Will You Learn in This Course? And it could be really interesting to include this learning target there. Right? What are you going to learn in this course? Well, at the end of this course, you're going to be able to explain what the EUTXO model is. And right now, if you see the word, like the letters EUTXO, and you're like, what the hell is going on? We just want you to know, don't worry, we've got you. You're already learning about it because you've already done a few important things. And hey, maybe you already built a transaction, so you're starting to know what a UTXO is. Cool. And in this course, we're going to get you able to do this. And if we introduce it at this point, then we can remind people about that throughout the course. Hey, that EUTXO thing, how you doing? And we can always just keep coming back to it. That could be really interesting to say it that way at that stage. Because last time, what did we do in module 103? We talked about open source contribution, reusing code from existing project. Yeah, we want to maybe replace this one. So yeah, I could see keeping a module like this at the end of the 100s, changing this one to like getting involved over at Gimbalabs. We could just combine these two into one, but we could have 103.1 be, I could explain the EUTXO model.
I don't know, maybe like for me, I think explaining UTXO model implies having a background in Cardano development, right? So, and our second level is building background knowledge. So maybe it is supposed to be in the end of not the onboarding modules, but so like in the end of onboarding modules, you will be able to do this by the end of the course, hopefully. But for me, it came much later. And actually, from watching a video from John Hughes on property testing, where he explains to the students, like, yeah, this is UTXO model, this is UTXO, and this is how it works. Yeah.
And one thing I always do whenever, if I'm working alone or with people I trust, I always put a lot more words on the page in a first draft. And my writing process is to put a lot of words and then remove them. So I'm throwing that here as something to chew on. It could be really interesting for module 103 to be different from all the other ones, right? You're not actually going to do anything in this module. But now that you've gotten started, now that you've seen a couple of things, let us tell you about this course. And then let us tell you a couple learning targets that you're going to be working on throughout the course. And you don't have to master these right now, but throughout the course, we're going to ask you, how you doing with the EUTXO model? How you doing with open source thinking? How you doing with just getting involved at Gimbalabs? And there could be other things on that list. It could be really cool to just introduce a couple of learning targets here that allow us to have like shared language for going back to once we get into building background knowledge. So not deciding anything on that yet, but that's there. So back to the top. I think I still really like these learning targets as a place to start. We've gotten really good feedback on these. We know that a lot of people have done the first module of the course. Right? We know that a lot of people get stuck on 101 because we asked them to install Nix, but we have pretty good evidence from years past that the first module is pretty good. And it's supposed to be quick. It's supposed to give people an outcome, right? And so they already feel successful. And so I think this is really good. The problem has been that we've followed it with this monster right here. And that's what we have to stop doing. Okay. So my proposal would be to keep a lot of this the same as it is, but maybe add one more learning target. And this connects to what Alex was saying as well. So the one where you said, I can tell what information is useful and where to find it, and even describing the architecture of a DApp. I think these are really important ideas. And I think we could do it by doing one change. We could include one more learning target. I don't like these words yet. This is not the final wording, but include a learning target where people are going to have some interaction with an application. And the point of that interaction is when they have it, we're going to show them a few things along the way. For example, I could imagine moving the PPBL faucet project to the beginning of the course. Okay, Alex, you brought up this idea last week, or I think even earlier than that, that we need less trivial first validators, right? Having somebody write always succeeds is actually not helpful. because it doesn't show them anything. Right? It shows them how to compile a contract, but there's nothing there, and that makes it confusing. And like I can speak for myself. When I was first learning Plutus in the Plutus Pioneers program, and I had a copy of Always Succeeds, it wasn't useful to me as a template. Right? I was not able to just like change some of the values because there were no values to change. So I even though I could compile it, it didn't show me, well, how do I actually structure a datum or a redeemer? And so giving people a little more. So look what we've done in the past. We've had the end of the 200 modules be this faucet project. And it does combine a lot of stuff. It's very cool. Parameterizing a contract, that's great. But what if we just showed people the faucet right away? People are already delighted that they can mint their token. What if we also have them do something with it? For example, they go to a page where they use their PPBL token to just withdraw some test gimbals from a faucet. But along the way, for example, we do this. The lesson is, hey, use Eternal, and let's just look at the confirmation screen that Eternal gives you. Let's look really closely at that. Let's look at the inputs. Let's look at the outputs. And let's just start to think about some vocabulary. Alex, if we did something along those lines, and then we could even then look at the resulting transaction on Cardano scan, could you imagine this helping people with the overview and knowing what's useful?
So what you're saying is in the first interactions with Cardano, you build your contributor token, like you mint your contributor token, and then you get some free TA there, right?
Yeah, you mint your token in lesson 4, SLT 100.4, and then you go to 100.5, where only if you have that contributor token can you trigger a transaction that lets you withdraw some other native asset from a validator.
I had something more evil in my mind.
What do you think?
I was thinking that like if you mint, your student doesn't know what he's doing. So you can actually a little bit set him up, and when he's minting his contributor token, the token can go into a contract. And then to recover his token, he has to learn how to interact with the smart contract. So he has to build a transaction.
Okay, so that's really good. I think we would lose people if we like said, hey, you just minted a token, but it's hidden already. And so
yeah, I thought so.
right, like we want people to have the experience of saying, oh, wow, now I have this token in my wallet and I can use it. But what you just said, that's the whole point of change your lucky number. Okay, so we can still include on the token some datum that you have to do a transaction to do. I think this is a really successful project, for example. And it doesn't have to be a lucky number. We could choose what we want to do. But there's something really elegant right here. But just in terms of like, if I have the token, I do this thing and we tell you, hey, what did you just do? Well, you saw some UI, some simple UI that we built. And in this course, we're going to teach you how we built that UI. And you saw that a transaction got built, and we took a close look at it in the Eternal wallet. Transactions are really important. You're going to start to learn more about those in 102. A validator was used. What the hell is a validator? Well, we're going to teach you about that in 101. And over the course of this course, you're going to see all of these things. In fact, you're going to learn how to mint your own tokens so that by the end of this course, if you want to, you're going to be able to build your own PPBL faucet. How does that feel? Now I'll keep going, but interrupt me, okay? So then if we did this, I think the faucet is simple enough, but also non-trivial enough that we could just teach that contract as our example in 101. Right? Remember, what is the faucet contract? It locks a native asset at a validator. And it allows anybody who holds a token with a given policy ID to withdraw a fixed amount of tokens from that validator. I know you talked about vesting, Alex, and to do that, we have to think about time and all that, which might be a good place to start, right? But what would you guys think about using the simple unlock with policy ID validator as the first one people see? Could we commit to writing it in a minimum of 3 different languages? We already have it in Plutus TX, Aiken, and Helios.
So then I will need to write faucet in Helios.
Would you? Yeah, I mean that's the idea, right? So I could take this. Hinson, do you think you could write a faucet in Aiken?
Yeah, of course.
And Alex, you want to take the challenge of writing a faucet in Helios?
Well, I will. No promises because I don't know. Does Helios support this? I have to check it, you know.
Yeah, give it a try. And after this meeting, I'll just grab the well, we can look for it. Let's just find that right now. There is a repo. Yeah, I'll drop this link directly in the chat so you can look at this validator. And the other thing I'm thinking, this is a tiny bit more, so it's not a very long validator, right? This is the whole validator right here. And it can be made even shorter if we don't worry about having params. What are the params in this case? It's just the access token symbol and the token symbol that we are distributing. We could even set ourselves up to teach about parameterized contracts by not including this bit, the faucet params, right here, the first time around. And we could just hard code the 2 currency symbols in question, right? And so what if we did that? What if it was a hard-coded version of this contract, not parameterized, that we're just showing people, hey, here's this thing and here's how it works. And if you want to, you can change these hard-coded values. Right? We're not teaching people parameters yet, because when is somebody most able to learn about parameters? When they're pissed off about hard coding values, right? And so the best way to teach somebody parameters, in my opinion, is to actually make them see why it kind of sucks to hard code your values and to start thinking about even how the compiler works. So maybe we could do something like that. But we've got this link. I'll drop that link into the Notion as well. That could be really cool. So it's, I don't know if the word right is the right word. Right, the real question, because previously what we did here, and we could look at, I guess we could look at the course as well. But like just looking at the learning targets, right? We had people compile the validator. The name of this was Write Your First Smart Contract, but they weren't really writing, and they were just grabbing Always Succeeds in a few different versions to get the concept of compiling to a validator. That's really what we want, right? So I don't care if we're going to have people copy and paste versions of this and just set up the dev environment. I don't know if this is everybody does all three or all students have to pick at least one. And maybe there could be, you have a choice here, right? You can do this in any one of these options and everybody has to choose one, could be the way we do it. Okay. But compile the contract is the key here. And then we show people, hey, now you made a contract, big whoop. But in order to use it, now we got to talk about transaction building, right? So we go into that. Simple transaction. Optional side quest is running your own node locally, but we've got Demeter run ready to go. Build a locking and an unlocking transaction with what? How about the faucet? Unlocking might even be easier to do first because we could teach people how to send their contributor token from their browser wallet where they minted it to a CLI wallet. And then we could have them build the unlocking transaction that they already did right here. But they can build the transaction that was happening under the hood, in this case with Cardano CLI. Right? Here, we're going to show you how to build an unlocking transaction that you actually already did in module 100. So you can see what was happening there. And remember that we will have introduced the eternal transaction preview. So people will have already seen inputs and outputs, redeemers and datums in that view. And now we're going to show them how to actually build that by hand with Cardano CLI. The locking transaction, this could actually be an extension, right? This could be like the end of onboarding. That's an unlocking transaction. This is a combo unlock and relock transaction. So that's pretty cool. So a couple things. I'm still having mixed thoughts about how much we could like do like the whole faucet project during onboarding. I'm not sure. Because one of the reasons we waited until 204 is that the other part of that project is people had to mint their own tokens. All right, what if this? Check it out. So I think it's clear. For me, we have to start with a simple TX. And I'm pretty confident that anybody who's developing can get access to building transactions on Cardano CLI. I don't think there's any blockers. And I think this is really useful. And that, every dev should at least one time copy and paste transaction hashes into a transaction, just because that gives them the hands-on feel for what the thing is. Then we show them, okay, another kind of transaction is one where you unlock from a validator, right? And we have this concept of unlocking with private key versus unlocking from validator according to rules. Then the lock-in transaction, this could still be always succeeds. And then maybe something like with the mini project, and then maybe lucky number. That starts to feel pretty interesting. We talked about this. Okay. And then I have a draft of a possible order of 200 level modules. But my first goal, like let's tomorrow maybe look at reordering these together. But I'm starting to feel excited that 100 through 103 could work like this. But I'm talking a lot. Anybody else? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm trying to learn the process, but I will think about whether the order and the contents will make sense after the call today.
Yeah.
Too much information, I cannot give kind of real-time reaction on this.
This is not a user-friendly document right now. So what I'm going to do tonight is try to write a draft of learning targets for these first 4 modules, and just write like a sentence or two of like, what's the story of the course we're telling? And I want to bring that to everybody tomorrow to say, all right, what if the first 4 modules, 100 through 103, told this story and had these learning targets? And we can critique that at the start of tomorrow's session. And then if we're happy enough with it, then we can think about, okay, as we move to 200, what's missing from this list, and do we need to reorder anything at all, right? And once we start to do that, then we can start writing learning targets. And I should say, even tomorrow, we're not going to say that these learning targets are done, but our goal is just to be moving towards a better draft, right? And hopefully next week we're feeling like, okay, this is at least what the first half of the course looks like, the 100 level, and we can start writing content. Let's do a quick checkout. We're running out of time, 5 minutes left, so I'm going to stop sharing. Alex, how are you leaving us today?
Thanks for being facilitative of the time and not going over. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Thanks for spending time with us. Hinson.
Yeah, I hope I could contribute more for today's session, but education side, I still, a long way to go. So try to sit aside and learn. But good session today. Hopefully I could participate more tomorrow.
Thanks, man. And just for everybody, Hinson and I were talking right before this meeting, like you're building amazing little tools. And all of us are starting to have special roles. If you build little toys that people can play with, then that's actually really important for writing lessons.
Yeah, I will throw that out in technical chat or general chat after today session.
Thanks, partner. Ken.
I'm just watching the process. Like I don't know how much that I'm contributing to it, but I'm just interested in watching the process. I would like to note that I am a NixOS user, and so being able to have some way of getting that information in the course, whether or not it has to be that way, is good. So
Love that. Thanks for spending this time with us. And yeah, let's keep talking about how we give people the option of learning Nix. Right. I don't feel comfortable requiring it, but I also don't feel comfortable getting rid of it entirely. And anybody who wants to know it, they should have a chance to learn it.
Yeah, I can second that. It's very rewarding experience.
All right. That more to come on that. To be continued. Let's figure that one out. Sebastian.
Yeah, really good, really good experience, good session. Thanks a lot for drive all this exercise.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Harsha.
I actually thought I'll go work in a different room, but this was pretty fun, so I had to stay back. And actually, these sessions remind me of, specifically this session reminds me of film school, where like we were taught how to write stories together, basically like adventures together. It feels a lot like that, so it was fun.
Yeah, dude. I've been thinking about the S3 game stuff all the time, right? I think there's so much in common with an RPG versus this way of planning a course. There's some fun overlap. Adrian snuck in. Hey, Adrian.
Hello. Yeah, nice to see the next PBBL course evolving.
Adrian was part of cohort 0. He helped build the first course. And Claudio.
Yes, very nice session. I do have my reservations about the faucet contract being the first thing you show students. I personally feel it's a little too much. We should find something intermediate to tone it down. Probably an auction contract, that's the first thing they do in the Pioneer program, maybe something simpler without so much machinery involved. But just to illustrate all the ingredients from the datum to Redeemer to the script in one contract. One more thing I was thinking we should consider adding to keep the course up to date. We only use NAMI and internal wallets, but Charles Hawkins has been pushing heavily for LACE. So I wonder we should incorporate LACE as one more wallet that people should be able to use. Because, I don't know what's related to Midnight and other projects coming, but he's been preaching about it pretty heavily. So it would seem worthwhile to look into it. And the other thing was the development environment. Dimitri run is great, and it's a really nice way to start. But we run into some problems at some point that they didn't keep in sync with the Bluetooth apps and stuff. We have run into some problems with there. So I was thinking, but of course that's extra work. But in many onboarding courses, they prepare a Docker container with the setup. Right, like they do that in the Bluetooth Pioneer program now. So as to have the local version, but without having the trouble of getting stuck, you might give the two options. If you want to learn more, do this step by step. But if you get stuck, here's a shortcut that can get you going. That's just an observation.
Yeah, so people can have both a compilation environment and a Cardano CLI environment all in a Docker container. All right, very cool. Yeah, that's a nice in between. Hey, Newman, you snuck in.
Hey, yeah, I did. I was listening in on the live stream. Really enjoyed it. That was really fantastic. I love the mathematician's dilemma. That really does sort of paint the picture, and it's something that we can address. You know, get people playing music basically, as
Cut it out a
opposed
bit, or it's just me.
What?
Oh,
I got him.
yeah.
Okay, maybe it's
It
just
could.
me.
It's kind of wonky today, but great session. Looking forward to tomorrow.
Thanks, man. All right, y'all. We're a minute and a half over. We're trying to finish on time. We're not doing bad. But thanks for hanging out today and see you tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.